the question we're really addressing today is, to what extent does this document, Birth to Five, support SchemaPlay practice? And there are three things that sort of, I think, are the key areas of SchemaPlay that we need to look for. One is the whole notion of free flow play. And of course, it'd be far too much to expect the ZPDF to be in there, but free flow play. The identification of schemes, so any reference to schemes, and the idea that we build upon what the child knows and can do, that fundamental principle of child-centeredness that SchemaPlay is based on. Well, if we look in the document, we see that, this statement from page 22 is quite clear about it. The children benefit from the opportunity to choose their own learning and inquiries through play when settings embrace a free flow of choice as children move between activities and experiences, not simply from inside to outside. And in our training, we talked about this understanding of free flow being all about going inside and outside. In the guidance document, they're extending that to actually choosing between resources within the setting and play activities, which is a step further, but it's a long way from Csikszentmihalyi and the idea of flow as being immersive, or Tina Bruce's understanding of it. As far as schemes are concerned, schematic play is mentioned. It's referred to as a type of play in the document, and it's all about what a form of play alongside sociodramatic and other forms. The other place that it's referred to a couple of times is in physical development. So we've got in positive relationships what adults might do. There's encouraging independence as young children explore particular patterns of movement, referred to as schemas. So there's a conceptualization of it being a physical movement, so a sensory motor notion that is something to build on, but it's obviously not taking it as far as...
John, I think we can, although it's only in physical development, yeah. I think we can at least hold some celebration there, because of the depth of knowledge we have around schemes collaboratively now. We know not only are they doing physical things, but they're actually, developing their understanding through applying the schemes to a range of contexts. Well, if we think about that in physical development, one of the things that we've been really trying to do in our feedback just recently with practitioners going towards their accreditation is to think about how the schemes that the children are applying in their play that are being sort of considered in terms of mathematics or considered in terms of an interest or whatever it might be, to also think about how you might support children's movement and their capabilities through things like dance. And when we apply schemes to dance, so if we're getting the trajectories in, we're getting the enclosures in, we can also help children's understanding. So like applying schemes through sort of how animals behave. So, we do like walking through the jungle and stuff like that, getting children to act out being a flamingo, being a giraffe with a long neck, bringing in the trajectories, bringing in the containing is a good way to help them understand the difference between animals as well. So we can bring in lots of learning through the dance. So the fact that it's in physical development is a positive, because hopefully we can sort of support our teams to think about how are they thinking about schemes in terms of physical development through dance and through movement. So it's good that it's there. It's a shame it's not in everything, but it is. That is due probably because of the lack of understanding of emergence. But it's good it's in physical play, so we can celebrate that point. That's good. Sorry, John.
Please, everyone, feel free to butt in, and also don't forget the chat facility if you've got a question or something that just occurs to you that you'd like to add to the session. Do post it up. The other area is building upon what the child knows and can do. That is referred to in when they're talking about the observation skills of practitioners. So they talk about it in terms of tuning in, observing it, and wondering about what children are doing. and being a sensitive observer, whether it's through gestures, facial expressions, words. It suggests that the adult can begin to focus on the what might the child be thinking about, what's in their mind, and what are they learning about right now. And I think that's a strong statement, that it says it characterizes an effective teacher. So there is a recognition of having to build on what the child already has, which is very clear. And it goes on to say that knowing the child well helps us understand what might be in the child's mind, the links they're making, whether they are exploring new ideas or gaining more information about existing thinking, as in SchemaPlay, for example. So again, we've got a foot in the door, as it were, in opening up SchemaPlay within settings that do adopt this this guidance wholesale. And the other way that they build on that is to adopt what was in the original development matters as the cycle of observation, assessment and planning. They've elaborated it quite a lot in this diagram on the left. The small one on the right is from the 2012, so the one on the left is from 2020's draft, this draft of Five Matters. And I thought it's worth looking at what they've added to it, because the white band around that central cycle, I think, is quite significant. It seems to be suggesting that those areas are associated with the inner aspects of it. So looking at it holistically like that, the overall framework is all about observation, and it refers directly in that to observations in the moment, which I get again is very positive in terms of supporting SchemaPlay practice, I think. When we actually look at how this white band suggests the observation, what it should be informed by, you've got the characteristics of effective learning and the practitioner's knowledge about how children learn, their knowledge of developmental psychology, for example. And then in the assessment part, we've got it informed by responding to children's interests, their funds of knowledge, their cultural capital, and then we've got this bit that's play, balancing play, and then the areas of learning, what skills and knowledge the children need to be introduced to them. And I think it's the only way I can understand this reference to the balance is that they're talking about the balance between teacher initiated and adult initiated and child initiated activities, and the balance between the given curriculum, areas of learning, the skills and knowledge that the adult wants to impart, and what the child is actually engaged in. And we really do think that that's a flawed understanding of balance, and that there are real problems with that, which we'll come back to. But in planning, the idea is that that's going to be informed by the enabling environment, continuous provision, shaping the curriculum, and the early years foundation stage themes and principles. So it is the same model. It's got a particular take on it, an interpretation, and it's still got this notion of the balance between adult-led and child-led activity. The other thing, of course, that there's quite big difference in this draft is that it's brought back the tables of unique child-positive relationships and enabling environments from the old development matters. And in terms of our ability to support practitioners in their observation of what children are doing in order to build on that, this first column, the unique child, is the crucial one, isn't it? It's the one that it's suggesting that this is guidance for people to help them observe what's happening. So we need to question whether it actually does that. Does it actually provide the means in the moment to support practitioners in observation? if we just take the first one there, reacts to changes of amount when these amounts are significant. Is it likely that spontaneously you will notice this in free flow play of a child? I think there's quite a lot of these statements suggest to me that really they're only indicators of things you might assess for a child. So it's another way of stating or presenting the curriculum. And that's the reason that they ended up being a tick list, because the only access to that statement is through this document. You're not actually going to see it spontaneously in the child's play. So the only way you're going to see it at all is if you look up the document and then go searching for it in the child's behaviour. It may very well not spontaneously happen, so you're going to end up doing a little assessment to see whether they can do it or not. And a lot of these statements are like that, I think. Mathematics is one area. If we look at writing, again, do these particular statements support the practitioner in observing free flow play?
It's just a little bit
will they
sad.
actually lend towards making another checklist?
It's just a little bit sad because the 2007 document did actually, in the unique child, talk about what the child can do rather than being an assessment. So it's a shame a lot of the doing stuff seems to have gone. So when we're looking at what a child can do, it doesn't seem that the statements are actually facilitating practitioners to look at what children can do and move them on. It looks like they're looking for a summative assessment rather than what they're actually doing. So again, it just looks like it's checking against different milestones, different ages, which the new EYFS was positively moving away from. And so our sort of high hopes for this document have been a bit dashed because of the not being able to support practitioners to look at what children are doing.
Another positive innovation, though, is that there are exemplars of practice. And this is one of them for literacy writing, for example. Curiously, they've entitled them Characteristics of Effective Learning. I presume that's because they've been written to actually demonstrate or illustrate as exemplars each of the characteristics of effective learning being placed. But it's basically an exemplar of good practice in writing at this level. And understanding of the world, again, looking at these statements, we need to ask whether it's something that you're going to see spontaneously or whether it's something that you're only going to be able to know if you actually ask the child or look for it especially. And again, we've got an example. These at this draft level, these characteristic of effective learning boxes aren't in all of the areas. They're probably the intention is that they're included in all of them eventually. They probably just haven't been drafted yet. Otherwise, the references to play are from the 2020 statutory framework. They're saying that children learn by leading their own play and by taking part in play which is guided by adults. There's quite a lot of references not to play, but to playful teaching and playful opportunities. So there's an encouragement of practitioners doing activities with children, but making them playful, which is slightly different, I think. And this statement, I think, is key. In rich play, children can become deeply involved as they take things they already know and combine in new ways so that their understanding deepens, often including using things that have learned in adult-led sessions. It's really sounding SchemaPlay-like now, in transforming their stock of knowledge into new connections and applications. Children develop mastery of concepts. They practice skills and develop creative approaches to thinking of new things to do, to make up stories and to create for their own particular purposes. So there is clearly an awareness of a process that's very akin and very consistent with SchemaPlay there. But overwhelmingly, what you see in there is the balance. And we talked about this in our training, and the idea that most people, when they think of balance, they think of a seesaw with an equal weight of the adult's initiation and the child's initiation on each side. Another way of looking at that is in terms of leverage or leverage, where the in the moment activity of the practitioner can be very small and very rare, but have a big impact on children's play. An even better metaphor that we use, I think, is the idea of plate spinning, and the adult's role being one to observe and put in input, lightly, a light touch input to keep the learning going, because children spontaneously learn all the time. In the key points for the document, one of the key statements is that play and self-initiated activities are ideal opportunities to build characteristics of effective learning. And the word build jumped out at me when I read this the first time, because it seems to suggest, and there are many statements in the document that seem to suggest the characteristics of effective learning are child characteristics. They're innate to the child. Whereas I'd always thought of the characteristics of effective learning as being properties of the learning environment. And even when you look at the index, or the contents page, I should say, of the draft, that's confirmed. In the unique child section, you've got reference to the characteristics of effective learning, and in enabling environments, you don't have any references to the characteristics of effective learning. Down below, where learning and development lists all the curriculum content that's being prescribed, you've got characteristics of effective learning alongside PSE, communication and language, literacy, maths, etc. They're not in the learning environment, they're actually part of the curriculum. I'm finding that difficult to understand. I don't understand how a child can build up the characteristics of effective learning as an individual. So that I think is something that we might question. The terminology has changed slightly, which seems to be almost in the opposite direction. In the 2012 Development Matters, they refer to the characteristics of effective learning, but in the 2020 document, it's the characteristics of effective teaching and learning, which fits in better with my understandings of it. Where in this draft they talk about the areas, the 3 prime and 4 specific areas of learning and development, they go on to say all of these areas of learning are connected together. Great. The characteristics of effective teaching and learning weave through them all. That's because children in the early years are more powerful learners than thinkers. And it goes on, the curriculum needs to take account of children's learning, not just in the areas of learning and development, but also in how they see themselves as learners and how they build the strong foundations for lifelong learning described in the characteristics of effective learning. How children learn and how they learn about their own learning should also be an integral part of the curriculum. Observing children through the how often helps practitioners to see what children understand. Now, I think they're talking about metacognition there. They're talking about children learning to learn, which obviously is only relevant to 4- and 5-year-olds. It won't be relevant to 2- and 3-year-olds. But even so, you know, how does that fit in with the characteristics of effective learning? The way that they were represented in the original Development Matters was, I think, pretty clear that the characteristics were conditions that needed to be satisfied to show that children were learning. So when Nancy Stewart described it in an article recently, she said what they should be doing is our practitioners should be asking themselves, how am I providing the interactions that support these? What positive relationships, what opportunities given to support, what enabling environments? So that isn't to do with something inside the child, but something that the practitioner's doing to make learning happen. We're asking ourselves, do you see them actively engaged? Do you see the children self-motivated to play and explore? Do you see them doing their own thinking? And if all of those are satisfied, then you know that they're learning, which is brilliant. That's what you want to know. So it's a clear quality indicator. And, you know, again, that she's very clear about that. How am I providing the interactions that support these? That's positive relationships, and what opportunities have I given to support these? What enabling environments have I provided? Those three are all actually provided by free flow play. The child will spontaneously satisfy all of those if they're allowed free access to their play. In terms of the further statement, what opportunities have I given to support these? What enabling environments have I provided? That's the role of the adult. And it's also that interaction between the adult and the child to actually sharing of minds so that they can actually take it forward and support it. And in previous presentations, we've talked about when we look at the characteristics of effective learning, the most practical thing to do is to actually look at what stops it happening. How do we actually break them down? And the SchemaPlay audit tries to actually identify some of those. And we all know what they are. Sometimes there's too much to allow the free flow play to happen. Sometimes there's too few physical resources, too many sometimes as well. Sometimes there's poor child access to resources for, you know, unavoidable reasons that need to be taken into consideration. Sometimes it's practitioners that don't really understand why they're doing it. But there are practical things on a day-to-day basis. Even the weather affects it sometimes, and motivation and safety. I think in terms of developing practice within a setting, we have to accept that these obstacles are there all the time and just constantly work to actually deal with them, to overcome them. And that's what managers do, I think. That's what leadership's all about. I'm going to stop there because I've been talking far too long, and let's just open everything up to discussion.